Buddy, welcome to everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. Now, I got to really watch my time today, 15 minutes. I'm going to keep checking the clock. Please keep that in mind because I won't have time to expand on everything that I would like to. So, the topic for today is the general debate between Judaism and Christianity. Okay? As a non Trinitarian Christian who follows the original theology of Christianity, I find a great issue with the fact that Judaism hurls all these accusations against Jesus, the New Testament, and Christianity, which are unfounded. A lot of the accusations that Judaism has against Christianity has to do with the Trinitarian Church versions, right? So I'm here to focus on one specific thing, which has to do with Messiah suffering in the Tanakh. And I'm not really going to touch on Isaiah 53. I'm actually going to read from Zechariah. And I got a number of other verses up here that will all work together to help prove something. But there's a very powerful verse in Zechariah which basically proves that the Messiah would suffer. But I have to explain a little bit first. Okay, now very quickly, four main points about the original Christianity, right? Because if I don't say this, any Jewish person or any rabbi listening would say, oh, well, it doesn't matter if, what you said with those verses is interesting. You as a Christian are wrong because Jesus was a fraud for X, Y, and Z reason, right? So, number one, non-Trinitarian original theology, Jesus is not God. There is no Trinity. Okay, so that removes the idolatry. You're not supposed to worship Jesus as God or anything else. Jesus would only get the same type of worship that, say, the king would or something like that there, like King David. But even still, the New Testament doesn't even say that he should be or that he was worshipped. Okay, so there's no idolatry. That's the first thing to understand. The next thing is that in the true theology of Christianity, there is no atonement sacrifice of Jesus. He didn't atone for us, and he was not a sacrifice. Okay, so those are three very important points that I just wanted to clear up here first, right? I said four originally, whatever, right? I don't have time to get into more. Those are the first three main important points. Oh, you could say the fourth would be that Jesus didn't bring a whole new religion. Sorry, I'm rushing here. He reinforced what already was. Matthew 5, Judaism for Jews. Acts 15, Acts 21, Gentile law for Gentiles. There was no new religion, no ending of Judaism, no replacing of Judaism, nothing like that. So, right there, there's four little principles, the four main principles of the true Christian theology. That puts me a lot closer, and Jesus a lot closer to Judaism, okay, being compatible. Okay, the reality is, he is the Messiah. It's 100% compatible, but Judaism just needs to be able to understand this. All they've ever heard for 2,000 years are these church theories that, paganize Christianity, and they demonize it because of that. So the first thing that Judaism says is that there's no record in the Tanakh of Messiah suffering or dying. Okay, this is their first claim. They claim that Messiah is only meant to be, arriving as an immortal, unconquerable victor. Okay, now I agree. It's a complex answer here, but I do agree. This is Messiah ben David. Okay, and Jew and Christian alike, we all agree that is true of Ben David. When he comes to conquer. He will be victorious, he will not suffer, and he will not die. So I just want to establish that now. I agree with Judaism on that, so we wouldn't be debating on that. Okay, Judaism also believes in Messiah ben Yosef, so I wouldn't have to debate on that. In fact, what I'm going to propose here with this video, and I've proposed for many years now, is that Jesus is Messiah ben David, okay, who incarnated ahead of time in a prior incarnation, who was Jesus, okay, the guy we know as Jesus, all right? So Jesus was an incarnation of Ben David, and because that incarnation would suffer and die, it wouldn't be victorious and conquering and all of that, because only Ben David is, that this prior incarnation is what has subsequently been termed as Ben Yosef, the one who suffers and dies. Okay, so I agree with Judaism. There is a Ben Yosef and Ben David. I agree on the principles of Ben David and the principles of Ben Yosef. The only thing I disagree on is the timing of the two. Okay, now I agree on the timing of Ben David. He comes at the end of 6,000 years. In fact, even Jesus, okay, who is Ben David, Jesus said that at the end of the 6,000 years, when the 7th millennia starts, which is a Sabbath rest for the earth, like Judaism says, that at the end of the 6,000 is when he and the angels arrive, like Ben David, to gather Israel, gather the Jews, and to install the eternal kingdom of peace on the earth. Okay, so I have no conflicts with what I believe and what Judaism believes on Ben David at all. The only difference is the timing of Ben Yosef. Okay, Judaism says Ben Yosef is a contemporary, meaning he's at the same time as Ben David. However, I would like to say, this is my counter argument to that. There is no evidence in the Tanakh. Okay, there is no evidence in the Tanakh that would prove that Ben Yosef is a contemporary of Ben David. There is none, quite simply. There is none. Okay, and it would be a waste of time for anybody from Judaism to try and argue that there is. There is stuff written outside of the Tanakh. But I always like to say, if you had a scale and you had Tanakh on one side arguing against other Jewish literature, okay, whatever it might be, you cannot say that the literature outweighs Tanakh. Tanakh weighs more in terms of divinity and significance. Okay, so if you cannot find it in Tanakh, I don't care how many times it's written outside of Tanakh. Okay, you can't use that as evidence against what is in the Tanakh. And in the Tanakh, there's no evidence to prove that Ben Yosef comes at the same time as Ben David. Okay, but what I want to show with this stream here today is something amazing from Zechariah, because in all my research, and as far as I know, for 2,000 years, Judaism has claimed that there is no evidence that Ben Yosef would suffer and die. Okay, there's no claim that Ben Yosef or Ben David would suffer and die in the Tanakh. Now, of course, stereotypically, very cliche, Christians have always argued for 2,000 years. Isaiah 53 talks about that. Okay, but Christians for 2,000 years didn't even know about Ben Yosef, and they have no clue to compute Jesus as Ben Yosef as a prior incarnation of Ben David. They have no clue to even compute that. Okay, so forget what the common Christian thinks. Forget that. Okay, the fact is that Judaism has argued there is no evidence in the Tanakh that Messiah Ben Yosef or David would suffer and die. Okay, now I don't have time to get into Isaiah 53. I've made a whole video on this. In 25 minutes flat, I prove, reading through all these verses from Isaiah, not just chapter 53, but I prove that it is not Israel who is the servant subject in chapter 53. Okay, and I prove that it is the Messiah. Okay, now watch that video there to save me repeating any of that information here. Okay, it's quoted from the Rambam, Nachmanides, Rashi, from the Talmud, from the Mishnah, from a number of sources. Disciples of Hillel all agreed with one accord that Isaiah 53, those passages are about the Messiah who would suffer and die for Israel and everybody. Okay, so go watch that video. I don't have time to get into it. So I would like to argue, and again, forgetting what the churches have said for 2,000 years, right? Because it's too confusing to get into the silly stuff they believe, okay, and their objective point. But there is evidence. It is a fact that Isaiah 53, as all those other major rabbis have agreed, it is about Messiah. Okay, now if it's about Messiah, okay, all I'm going to say on that topic right here, Isaiah 53, is if it is about Messiah, it's clearly not about Ben David. Jews and me and the Jews would all agree on that. Okay, me and Judaism would agree on that, because Ben David doesn't suffer and die. So who would it be about? It would be about Ben Yosef. Okay, and I've tried to propose that before. What if Isaiah 53 is about Ben Yosef, but Judaism refuses to believe that it's about anybody other than Israel, which is why I will refer everybody to my video there, because I prove it scripturally, okay, that it is not Israel. But anyways, besides from that, so let's leave Isaiah 53 out of this for time's sake. Okay, I've got about 10 minutes left. Where else in the Tanakh does it talk about Ben Yosef at all? Where does it mention that there will be this Ben Yosef type figure? And where does it mention in the Tanakh that this figure would suffer and or die? Ignoring Isaiah 53. Where does it talk about it? Okay? Well, we know very famously in all the Tanakh prophecies, including the one from Daniel, it talks about Ben David arriving in great, immortal, glorious form. For example, in Daniel 7 verse 13, I was seeing in the visions of the night, and lo, with the clouds of the heavens, as the Son of Man was one coming, and unto the Ancient of Days he is come, and before him they have brought him near. And unto him is given dominion and glory and a kingdom, and all peoples, nations, and languages do serve him. The entire earth serves him. This is the Messiah. Okay, and he has a heavenly arrival. This is Ben David. He will come to conquer from the heavens, and he will be immortal. Okay, this is one, and it says his dominion is a dominion age during that passeth not away. It's eternal, and his kingdom that which is not destroyed. Okay, this is the Messiah, Ben David. All right, and all the other Tanakh prophecies talk about Ben David. Okay, now for example, Ezekiel, God calls David his prince in the end days times, right? He says, I am the king, David is my prince. Okay, there's a number of verses that show that the Messiah is the prince, God is the king. Okay, so now that we know Ben David is the prince, and we know all that about Ben David, I have no argument on anything to do with that. What about Ben Yosef? Like I said, ignoring Isaiah 53, where else is there? Well, I was shocked the other day when I was reading Zechariah 9, and I came across verse 9 here. I was shocked. Now, not every Bible reads the same. Not even old Jewish Bibles and translations. A number of times I've tested this. I go to, say, Chabad, Mekon Mamre. I go to a number of different Jewish resources, or ones that the rabbis claim, say rabbis on YouTube, they claim I use this. I've compared 4 or 5 on a number of occasions, and each time they're all different. They all have different punctuation, sentence structure, words being used. So who has the right Hebrew original, right? That's why I don't listen to what a rabbi said. I don't go to a website and get stuff. I go to the Hebrew original Masoretic. Sorry, I'm rushing. The Hebrew original Masoretic. Okay, and I check on certain things and make sure it is the authentic one and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I know what I'm using is correct. Now, in verse 9 here, it has one key word, which distinctly shows that this Messiah they're talking about is Ben Yosef. Okay? It says, Rejoice exceedingly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Lo, thy king does come to thee, righteous, and saved is he, afflicted, and riding on an ass, and on a colt, a son of she-asses. Now, one key word there everybody will breeze over, and I think everybody has probably 2,000 years. It's the word afflicted. And that's why it matters what Bible translation you're using. Even if you are Jewish, using a Hebrew Bible, you know what I mean? Even Masoretic, they always differ, okay? The word used here is afflicted. I have never heard a Jew or Christian ever talk about this verse, even Christians, ever. I was shocked when I saw that. I had to go verify that this was the term used. So it says afflicted. Now, we, Judaism and we both agree Ben David is not afflicted. He doesn't suffer, he doesn't die. He comes, he's victorious, he's immortal, etc. Right? So if we know that, this can only be talking about Ben Yosef. Now, this brings me to a next fact. If we can see here clearly that Ben Yosef would be afflicted, okay, and he's coming humbly on an ass, we can see the comparison here. Ben David comes in the heavens, immortal, victorious, etc., undying, unconquerable. He doesn't suffer. Ben Yosef, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. He comes lowly on the earth, of all things on a donkey. You know what I mean? He suffers and he dies. Okay? So we see they're two quite opposites. Now, like I said at the beginning of the stream, if I did say it, Ben David would incarnate as Ben Yosef. When is to be determined, but he would incarnate as Ben Yosef. As Ben Yosef, he would come in a humble arrival on this donkey and all that. He would suffer and he would die like any normal human would. Okay? After he dies, we know the Messiah would resurrect. This is a great famous prophecy. All Jews believe that the Messiah would resurrect. So if we know the Messiah resurrects, there is no logical need for Ben David to resurrect. He's arriving in the heavens with great glory, alive. There's no need for him. You don't sleep in the dust after you die. When you die, you're judged, and you go to the corresponding place. Okay? So, quite simply, to end that little silly argument there, the patriarchs are not sleeping under the dust waiting to be resurrected, David included. No. He comes in the heavens. So, how can you compute the fact that you have a heavenly arrival of an immortal one and a terrestrial one who suffers and dies? Well, it's simply they are one and the same. The Tanakh does not talk about two messiahs. It talks about one. In all the prophecies, it's only one. It doesn't say there's going to be 2, 3, 4, or 5. It says there's one Messiah. But we can clearly see one Messiah somehow has two different, totally different, like yin and yang, night and day differences. Humble coming on a donkey, he suffers and dies. Coming in the heavens with great glory, and he doesn't die. How do you compute the two if there aren't two messiahs? Well, it means the two are one. Okay, so which means Ben David is the one that trumps here. Ben David was the one who came first, and he incarnated as Ben Yosef, obviously for a purpose, okay? And in that purposeful incarnation, reincarnation, really. He could not be an immortal. He had to suffer and he had to die. Okay, even if he didn't suffer in his lifetime, hypothetically, he would still suffer when he dies, because dying, you suffer when you die. Okay, so he would suffer and die. This is, I think, undeniable proof, A, that Messiah ben Yosef will suffer, and logical proof that ben Yosef must be Ben David. It makes perfect sense. Ben Yosef resurrects as his true self, Ben David, who cannot be conquered. Okay? Quite simply. Now, this is what Christianity teaches, but the churches have come up with so many crazy theories over the years with everything. They've totally bastardized everything. So I don't even like to think about what the churches have taught for 2,000 years. Okay? But looking at the Tanakh and a true Christian theology, this makes perfect sense. Now, in fact, I also want to point out that it says here, "Lo, thy king does come to thee, righteous and saved is he," in verse 9. It says right there that his title is righteous king. That is Melchizedek. "Lo, thy king does come to thee." Again, that reinforces that the Ben Yosef is the Ben David. Okay? They can't be contemporaries. They cannot be contemporary. They are the one. The two are one, so they obviously can't come at the same time. Thank you. Right? But also, like I was saying, he is the righteous king. Now, who else is called the righteous king? Melchizedek. Now, Qumran Scroll 11Q13, and it's been proven the Qumran Scrolls were not written by Essenes. Scholars know this now. That was a silly little hippie hypothesis people had back in the day, but it's been proven that they were not the Essenes. Okay, they were Jews. They wrote these things hundreds of years before Jesus in most cases. And 11Q13 affirms a Jewish belief that Melchizedek was the heavenly priest, okay? And that he was the destined Messiah, that he will come down and judge angels and men and whatever, the all mankind and all earth on the great judgment day. Okay, the same type of description used by Isaiah and Daniel and everybody else. Okay, now in Christianity, again, forget what the churches teach, it shows that there is a mysterious connection in the book of Hebrews between Jesus and Melchizedek. Paul, the author of Hebrews, also says that Jesus has suffered many times from the foundation of the world, but now, once and for all, when he died there as Jesus, that was the last time he's going to go through all that. Okay, no Christian church has even read that verse out for 2,000 years. They're oblivious. I've never met a Christian who knows that verse exists. Probably because all their Bible versions twist and change all the words around, because that sounds like a strange concept to them, because churches don't believe in reincarnation. Okay, so the simple fact is Jesus has been here many times. He was only called Jesus when he was here 2,000 years ago. Who knows what his name was before then? But the fact is, according to New Testament theology, he has a profound, mystical, some type of connection to Melchizedek. He's in that office of priesthood and kingship of Melchizedek, but it does not say in the book of Hebrews that he is Melchizedek. You can only infer that. When you look at Qumran Scroll 11Q13 and the other Qumran Scrolls, it quite clearly shows that the Messiah is the heavenly high priest. And it all, when you start to combine everything together here, it all makes perfect sense. The high heavenly priest, Melchizedek, always was the Son of God up in the heavens. There's many sons, but he was the primordial Son of God. He was the chosen Son of God. Maybe because he was the first Son of God in the heavens. Who knows? But he was the heavenly high priest. And he had the office of Melchizedek up there, which is a king / priesthood. It's a dual, has two offices in one. Okay? This is what God has in the heavens. When God had a city down on earth, it was Salem. Okay? That preceded Israel and Jerusalem. This is where God put his king priest, Melchizedek, here. This is what the Tanakh tells us, not stuff outside the Tanakh. That's what Tanakh tells us. God had appointed this, heavenly and earthly, before Israel even existed. And Abraham, who Israel came through, did obeisance unto them, okay, unto Melchizedek. So Melchizedek is above what came after it. So all the Levitical, Zadokite, all that stuff from Moses and all that is under, and it does obeisance to Melchizedek. If Melchizedek priesthood came before, okay, and I'm telling you from the Christian perspective it has come after, you can see that it was only a temporary and intermediary thing to do with the Mosaic, the priesthoods through Moses, okay? So Melchizedek, most importantly, came before. It trumps it. The Mosaic does obeisance to it anyways. In Psalm 110, scholars have proven this is a messianic psalm. It is not about Abraham or anybody else. It's a messianic structure in terms of linguistics and language and words used. They've compared it, done the science of it. It's a messianic prophecy. And God clearly is talking to the Messiah, who is the king, okay? And he says to the king that thou art a priest together, a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. Okay, so that shows you Messiah would not be from the Mosaic lineage of priests and this and that they are kings. He would be of the Melchizedek priesthood and kingship status, which aligns up with what the Qumran scroll authors believed. It aligns up with the New Testament. So altogether, what we can see here is that the Messiah, the Messiah had a heavenly existence before he came here as Jesus, okay, and before he comes back here again at the end of times, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, he had that heavenly existence. Now, therefore, by definition, he could be called a messenger. Okay, an angel doesn't mean you have bird wings and you're a spirit being. An angel is just rendering a messenger. Messenger, a donkey could be a messenger. If you don't live on this earth and you're outside of it, you're a messenger. Okay, it's just a technicality. So if he's not from here, he's a messenger. Jesus testified, I am not of this world. I'm going to go back to my Father and all this and that there. Okay, so that would technically make Jesus a messenger. Now, most Christian churches will call me a heretic for believing that. According to Judaism and its theology, it is perfectly acceptable for an angel to incarnate even as the Messiah. It's perfectly acceptable. Okay, it's not outside the realms of legal possibility according to God's law. Okay, but Judaism has always argued, where is the proof in Tanakh that such would occur? So if Jesus is the heavenly high priest, the heavenly prince, the heavenly son of God, that was always going to be his destined role as the prince son of God, to be the heavenly priest and king unto all the creation and all of that. If all of that's true, where do we find any evidence of him being a messenger or of messenger status in the Tanakh? Well, that would be from the very famous prophecy for Numbers 24:17. I see it, but not now. I behold it, but not near. A star has proceeded from Jacob, and a scepter has risen from Israel. That right there is all the proof you need. A star. It refers to Messiah as a star. And if you read Judges 5:19 and the rest of the Tanakh, even the New Testament especially, you can clearly see that star is a biblical term to symbolize messengers. Why? Because most of them live out amidst the stars. Okay? So quite clearly, here is your piece of proof that the Messiah would and could be a messenger. Okay? It would also explain why he was mysteriously on earth running God's kingdom here, Salem, before anything else happened with Moses. Okay? God had already established order and a priesthood and a kingship and all that up in the heavens and on the earth before Moses. Okay? Moses came after and they all did obeisance to it. Okay? That's the important point. Now let me close some of these windows down here. Now, we're a few more verses to prove that he is the heavenly prince. If we go and read Joshua really quickly here, okay? Joshua, I think it was Joshua, met somebody in the battlefield. And anyways, this great figure with a sword and all that standing over him. So anyways, verse 14, he saith, No, I am prince of Hashem's host. Now I have come. And Joshua falleth on his face to the earth and does obeisance. And saith to him, What is my Lord? Speaking unto his servant. So we have Joshua here, putting his face to the earth, doing obeisance and calling him my Lord. Now those three separate things might be coincident, more meaningless, but together, this is enough proof, suggestive if anything, if not outright proof, but it's highly suggestive proof that this figure, the prince of the host, is of a stature as I'm describing Messiah to be. And what I postulate is that prince of the host was Messiah. It makes sense. We know Messiah is the prince. Okay, and everything else I just talked about. He is the prince unto God. God calls Messiah his prince. Okay, so he would be above Michael as well. Now, in Daniel, it says here that this great evil king, one of the Romans or Greeks or whoever it might be, whatever, when he exerted himself against people, and in verse 10 it says, Yea, it exerteth unto the host of the heavens, these are the messengers, and causeth to fall to the earth of the host, and of the stars, the messengers. He's not trampling suns to the earth, is he? Stars, messengers. And throweth, and trampleth them down. And unto the prince of the host, the guy we just read about in Joshua, it exerteth itself, and by it taken away has been the continual sacrifice. Okay? So this earthly king would exert himself against the prince of the host. We know the prince of the host was down on the earth in Joshua's day meeting people. We know here that they would be interacting with the earth again. It is 100% viable to say that the prince of the host could be the heavenly priest, Melchizedek, just like the Qumran scrolls all agree that this one figure is the Messiah. Okay? So why would he incarnate? If all of this is true, then why would he incarnate? And also, while I'm on that Prince note, Isaiah. Actually, I wouldn't even get into that one. There's a number of other verses. Let's leave it at that, because I'm running out of time. There are a number of other verses in Tanakh, especially in the New Testament too, that talk about the princely status of the Messiah. Okay. In Daniel 8:25, actually, it even says, "Against the prince of princes, this evil king standeth." Again, referring to the prince of the host. Okay, he's the prince of all princes. That could only refer to the Messiah. Okay, so all of this evidence shows that this heavenly figure is the Messiah. So the great ending question is, why did he come 2,000 years early in this incarnation / reincarnation Jesus? What was the point? Why did he have to come and suffer and die? If he wasn't an atonement, if he wasn't a sacrifice, if he wasn't God, then what was the purpose of any of it? Well, in studying the New Testament and publishing my systematic theology of Christianity, which I've got published around the world now, 100% 5-star reviews, by the way. In doing that, in one chapter, I dedicated a study, and I found that about 2/3 of all the references in the New Testament as to why Jesus came, when he did, or why he came at all, 2/3 of them all say he came to enlighten. It all ties back to Malachi's prophecy. Malachi said that that God would send the reincarnation of Elijah, who was John. John was testified by Jesus to be the reincarnation of Elijah. Okay, so that was confirmed from Christianity's point of view. But that Malachi said that the reincarnation of Elijah would return, and the Messiah, to turn the hearts of the people essentially away from sin and darkness to God before he smites the earth. That was a threat. God would smite the earth again. Remember the flood? Even if he's just talking about Israel, he was going to smite the land unless the people turned away from darkness. The only way that could happen, because people couldn't do it by themselves, they had been failing to, is to have a booster. Okay? First booster is Elijah returning. Next booster, Messiah. Elijah will confirm Messiah. Okay? So this was Malachi's great warning. So Jesus testified in 2/3 of all cases, all the testimony of him, why he came and when and why he came when he did, is because he came to enlighten. Okay? He talked about the ages coming to an end. That age back then was coming to an end. The next one is going to start, and this and that there. So he talked all about it. It wasn't a mystery. Okay, he came to enlighten. And what did Jesus teach? Reformation. John did a baptism of reformation to the remission of sins. That's how you're forgiven in Christianity, true theology. You reform, just like Ezekiel 18 teaches. In fact, in Christianity, it says you can only get into heaven if you've been reborn. It teaches separately in other verses, to be reborn means to be baptized. It teaches in other verses that baptism is not by water or laying of hands, it's by the fire of God's Holy Spirit, and you only get that through reformation. When you reform and turn your heart to God and fill it with light and banish the darkness, then God will put his Spirit upon you. That's 100% biblical. That's 100% compatible. That is what Judaism teaches. It's not some new, different, crazy religion with Jesus. You know what I mean? So that's all I have time for today. I'm really late. I've got to get going. God bless you all.